York, Lancaster, and Chester County in Pennsylvania. And true, I'm not bragging, just the facts. And I will say to those here that they were my 3 best counties in the state, York, Lancaster, and Chester County. So great Republican counties. And so I expect no different here in my adopted home of South Carolina in York, Lancaster, and Chester. And it's great to be here. I'm excited to be back to South Carolina. Karen and the kids, Glenn didn't mention my family. My wife Karen and I are very blessed. We're raising 7 children, ages 20, 18, 16, 13, 11, 10, and 3. And so we are very blessed, and in I guess mid-July, we hopped in the car, actually 2 cars, and traveled across from Pennsylvania to Iowa, and spent about 3.5 weeks in Iowa in anticipation up to the straw poll. And for us, it was an important moment for us. Obviously, just as a family, we stayed on a farm in Oskaloosa, Iowa, and had some great experiences there. But I went out and did 50 cities in 15 days. Did town hall meetings from every corner of the state. One of the reporters in Iowa called my campaign the Ring of Fire campaign, because the straw poll, which you folks have heard about, is in Ames, which is in the geographic center of the state. It's also where most of the population of the state is, around Des Moines and Ames. And most of the candidates, when they campaigned for the straw poll, since the straw poll is a statewide poll, which you have to come to Ames to vote, most people just campaigned in the Ames and Des Moines area. Well, I campaigned everywhere. And most people thought that was a pretty silly thing, because people aren't going to drive 3-4 hours to go to a straw poll. Well, they did for me. And it's because we went out. We went out and did what I'm doing here tonight. We did 51 town hall meetings where I got up and got in front of the folks and said, look, you folks are in a, you folks are blessed. Yeah. You folks are blessed in Iowa, as you are here in South Carolina, with a privilege in this country. And you have the privilege of actually, in Iowa, they have, I say Iowa, they narrow the field. And in South Carolina, you guys pick the winners after Iowa and New Hampshire narrow the field. And that is a big responsibility. And I know you take that very, very seriously. And so do I as a presidential candidate. That's why I make it a point when I come to these towns and cities and these 3 early primary states to make sure that I have an opportunity to share my thoughts with you, but also that you share your thoughts with me. Go around and meet everybody, take whatever questions people have, and then speak, and then take questions afterwards. I want you to kick the tires. See, I feel very good, and I feel even better after the Ames straw poll. Then once everybody gets a chance to actually meet the candidates, kick the tires, look at their record, look at what they're proposing and what they think they can accomplish in both winning the election as well as serving this country after you win the election, we're going to match up very, very well against anybody in this field. And so that's why I'm traveling around. You're not going to see a lot of me on TV, unfortunately. So far, the national media has decided that for some reason we're not in a, quote, top tier. So they don't pay a lot of attention to us. But this is the blessing that you have in South Carolina, because you get to pick the top tier, not them. And so let me share with you why I'm here, why I think that I'm the best candidate to win this election, and why I think I'm the best candidate to actually govern this country after the election's over. First, let me share with you why I'm here. Well, I have 7 children. And Karen and I, we had a very tough decision to make as to whether you take children ages 20 to 3, and obviously a very important time in these kids' lives, and you get up and you run around the country campaign for president. I would only do this in one situation and one situation only, and that is, I would have to think that this is the most critical election for my children and for my country in my life. And I believe that. So yes, this is a sacrifice, but it's one that we must all make. This is the most important election in our country's history because something fundamental is at stake in this election. It's not just about our economy. It's not just about our national security. It isn't even about the right to life. It is, in essence, whether America, as we were given it by the previous generation, and by generations past, is going to be the America that we are going to hand to the next generation. I really believe we are at a turning point in American history. We're at a turning point in American history. And it's important to understand, in thinking about that turning point, first, who we are. One of the things that bothered me most when I saw the most recent report of how our children are doing in school is that the worst subject for our kids is not math and science. You hear all the folks talk about how bad we're doing math and science. But what is the worst subject matter for our children graduating from high school? History. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, our educational system is not teaching our young people, and our culture is not teaching our young people who we are as Americans. Ronald Reagan, when he left the White House in his farewell address, his last thing he said to the American people was his concern about civics and civic education, about having a country that people won't be willing to strive and fight for if they don't know who we are. Well, who are we? What makes America America? We would all admit that America is not an ethnicity. Nobody considers themselves ethnically American in this room, I would suspect. We all consider ourselves hyphenated Americans in one way or another. So America isn't an ethnicity, then what is it? Well, it is a core set of values and principles that people, when they come to this country, if they accept, then they become an American. That makes us different than any other country in the history of the world. We have a woman here who's from Britain. I could go to Britain and live there for 50 years. I'd never be a Brit. But she can come to here to America, and she can be an American. That makes us different. But what is it that is an American? I would make the argument that it comes from our founding document, and that's the Declaration of Independence. There may be some Tea Party people here, and I love the Tea Party. The Tea Party, most folks who are Tea Party members carry around their Constitution. And you hear a lot of talk in America today about the Constitution. Is it in the Constitution? Is it following the Constitution? And the Constitution is an important document, don't get me wrong. But the Constitution is the how of America. It is the owner's manual, the operator's manual of America. It's how we conduct our business. But it's not who we are. Who we are is not in this document. Who we are is in a different document. It's in the Declaration of Independence. That's the why of America. The why of America is in these words that all of us know and we're taught. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the why of America. It is the soul of America. That America is a country, for the first time in the history of the world, that said that rights come from God and go to each and every one of us. Why? Why? Well, because we're equal, right? But why is that? No, we're equal only because God sees us as equal. And God gives us rights equally. This is the foundational principle of America that makes us different than every country that ever existed before. No country had ever based its reason for existence in the concept that rights have come from a creator. And that creator, by the way, all known to our founders, has laws and a code by which we must live. They say that. Has these rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the fundamental right that God gives us all is life. It's foundational. You can't have life. The other rights don't matter. Liberty is next. And then, of course, the pursuit of happiness. And what did he mean? What did our founders mean by the pursuit of happiness? Did they mean, as some and even our party suggest today? There are libertarians within our party who say happiness is really to do whatever you want to do. To do what pleases you. The popular culture says, just do it. Live the life whatever you want to do. No holds barred. That is real happiness. Our founders understood it differently. If you look up the definition of happiness at the time of the founders, it was defined in Webster's dictionary as doing the morally right and good thing. See, our founders understood that God gave us rights to pursue His will. Our founder, John Adams, said, our Constitution, this document, was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the governments of any other. Why? Free people who lives lives unconstrained by moral behavior lead to anarchy, not freedom. At the same time of the Declaration of Independence and of the Constitution, there was another constitution drafted, this time in France, the French Revolution. Identical in many respects to the American Revolution, except one key ingredient. They had a document, their Constitution, which was very similar to the American Constitution. But what they didn't have was a declaration where they stated explicitly that rights came to them from God and that their God's laws would have to be followed. They, in fact, had a secular revolution. And that secular revolution resulted in chaos, in the guillotine. Ladies and gentlemen, we're at a time in American history right now where there's a group of people who would like to see a different kind of revolution in America. Who want to take your freedom away and give it to the government. And the most important case in point, and the reason I'm in this race, is because of that, Obamacare. Obamacare is the greatest threat to American liberty. The greatest threat to this country built on the moral foundation that I just described. Why? The French Revolution ultimately was about a group of people accumulating power and using it against others. All, of course, for the good of the people. Always, of course, for the good of the people. That's what government does, is accumulate power for, quote, the good of the people. Well, in this case, we have a government that wants to accumulate power. The ultimate power over your health, over your life. Why do you think that for 100 years the left in America has been trying to take control of government? Trying to take control of health care by the government. This has been their cause. They've gotten around the edges. They got Medicare and Medicaid. But they were never able to get the broad swath of America in the private sector until just a few months ago. And they knew it was unpopular that they plowed through. Why? I was in the green room at Fox a few days before the House vote on the floor of the House. And I ran into Juan Williams, who was, as you know, Barack Obama's mouthpiece on Fox. And so I asked Juan, I said, why are you folks doing this? You're committing political suicide by ramming this down the throats of the American people. Why are you doing this? And his answer was, well, let me tell you what Obama's folks just told me. Quote, we believe Americans love entitlements. And once we get them hooked on this entitlement, they will never let it go. That's how they see you. They see you as people to hook. They see you as people to create as a dependent group of people who rely upon the government, and once you do, they've got you. And then that basis of America, that freedom that I talked about, is no more. Think about what Barack Obama did just a few weeks ago when the debt ceiling crisis was at its height. And it looked like he was going to lose in the popular opinion. He went to a microphone, looked in the camera, and said to the American people, call your member of Congress. And who did he tell to call? He said, Social Security recipients, you will not get your check. He said to Medicare recipients, you won't get your benefit. He said to veterans, you won't get your check. He said to spouses of people who serve our country overseas, they won't be paid. He took that hook and pulled the string and flooded the switchboard. Now imagine every single one of you is now dependent upon the government for your help. It's over, folks. Our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world because they believed in free people. They believed in people having rights given to them by God to pursue God's will in their life. And we changed the world. I remind everybody, at the time of the Revolution, life expectancy in this country was between 35 and 40 years of age, exactly what it was at the time of Jesus Christ. We were an agrarian society, exactly what the economy was at the time of Jesus Christ. For 1,800 years of rulers, of emperors and kings, who governed for the people, who used the power given to them for the people, always benevolently for the people. The human condition did not change. And once America happened, and we began to believe for the first time in every ordinary American, life expectancy in 235 years has doubled. We have been through an industrial revolution, a technology revolution, and now the standard of living for the poorest person in America today exceeds the wealthiest people in America just 50 years ago. This is the dynamism of America. This is what is at stake in this election. The very heart and soul of the moral enterprise that is a country that believes in God-given rights and free people to determine their own destiny. You want to know why the Tea Party rose up? You want to know why people are on edge? You want to know why there's such big crowds? It's because they know that if we fail in this endeavor and do not overturn Obamacare and put this country back to a path of limited government, then everyone in this room will be a co-conspirator in losing the greatest country in the history of the world. So people ask me, with 7 children and our littlest one, bless her, she has a very severe disability, and she is a miracle to be alive. And I wonder, even today, whether this is the right thing to do, given the limited time she has on this earth. But I will tell you that I am not going to let this country go under. I am not going to let the great promise that generations of Americans fought for, struggled, sacrificed lives, fortunes, and their sacred honor on my watch. Not this. Ladies and gentlemen, we need a leader to remind us who we are. The greatness of Ronald Reagan was not his policies. He reminded us who we are and what we're all about. That our DNA is different than everybody else. We're Americans because we want to be an American. We want to be free. This is what makes us different, great, and can and will be. Why am I the best candidate to paint that vision? Well, first off, I've got a track record of being able to paint that vision and win in districts and states that, frankly, no one else can match up to. My first race was in 1990. I was all of 32 years of age. I ran against a 14-year Democratic incumbent that had never gotten less than 60% of the vote in a horrible election year in a 61% Democratic district. I was outspent 3-1, given no chance of winning. No one gave me any money from Washington or anywhere else. In fact, they didn't even know my name in Washington. And I won. Some said it was a miracle. What did I do? I did what I've been doing right here, only in front of a lot smaller groups. Went to houses, knocked on 20,000 doors with my wife Karen. Went to everybody who would have a coffee clutch or whatever, even a drink at the bar, whatever, whoever would listen to me. I went out and talked to them, and I shared the vision. I shared what America was about and the principles I believed in. I shared limited government, strong conviction, moral values, the right to life, the sanctity of marriage, and a strong America. And we won. Upset everything. Well, for my troubles, my friends in the state legislature decided, since Pennsylvania was going to lose 2 seats, one of them to South Carolina, that they were going to eliminate my district, and they did. They put me in a district that was 71% Democrat, represented by a 24-year Democratic incumbent. I was given up for dead. So I went to Washington, D.C., knowing full well that I was only going to be there 2 years, and then I'd be gone. So I did, as Glenn said, we shook things up. I formed a gang with a guy named John Boehner. We formed a group called the Gang of Seven. And we shook things up in Washington, D.C. And as a result, when I came back and ran for re-election, I ended up getting 60% of the vote in a 71% Democratic district. When George Bush, 41, the old man, ran for re-election against Bill Clinton, he got 29% in the district. I then went back to the Congress and led the charge, this time on welfare reform. Bill Clinton said he wanted to end welfare as we knew it. Well, I wanted to make him stick to his word. So I got put on the Ways and Means Committee, and I was the ranking member of the subcommittee, and I wrote a bill, along with a few other folks, that became the Contract with America provision to end welfare as we knew it. Welfare reform. I ran for election in 1994, this time against another Democratic incumbent. 3 races, 3 Democratic incumbents. This Democratic incumbent had just won one of the most important special elections in the country back in 1991. He beat the former 2-term governor of Pennsylvania, Richard Thornburgh, and he beat him with a campaign team and a message that Americans soon heard about. The campaign team was James Carville and Paul Begala, and the issue was health care. If you have a right to a lawyer, you should have a right to a doctor. Well, they went on to Little Rock, Arkansas, and ran a campaign for president under Bill Clinton in 1992. In 94, they came back to run his re-election. You want to know, you want a candidate who's been up against the best the Democrats have to offer? I was up against Carville and Begala in a state with 1 million more registered Democrats than Republicans. And I won. I got James Carville so mad that in his book he listed his top 5 most hated Republicans, and I was number 3 on the list. So I won election, went to the United States Senate, and took up the charge of welfare reform. I was a freshman member, standing toe-to-toe with Daniel Patrick Moynihan, one of the authors of the 1960s Great Society programs, and Ted Kennedy. Toe-to-toe with the 2 lions of the left. And I won. And we got half the Democratic caucus to end a federal entitlement for income support for the poor, to block grant that money to the states, to put a requirement of work, and to put a time limit on welfare. Something no one thought could ever happen. The centerpiece of the Great Society. I led the charge in the United States as a freshman United States Senator at the age of 36. And I won. Bill Clinton vetoed it twice, but he finally signed it. Why? Because we went to the American public and we convinced them of the rightness of our cause. Not that we wanted to punish poor, but in fact that welfare was punishing the poor. And we convinced. People want to say, how do you get change in Washington? You convince people of the rightness of your cause and get the American public behind you. Is it easy? No. Can it be done? Yes, it can. You want someone who can go to Washington and do the same thing with Medicaid, which has to be done? With food stamps? When I took to the floor to change welfare, the welfare rolls were the highest they'd ever been in the history of the program. Right now, the food stamp rolls are the highest they were in the history of the program. So at its height, we were able to get rid of this program. Almost impossible to imagine. And that's exactly what we have to do with food stamps. How do we get it done? We get it done by leadership. We have a lot of people in this race who run around saying, I'm tough, I'll be steel this, and titanium this, and no one will be tougher than me. I'm pretty tough. But I also know the difference between leadership and showmanship. And there's some people who are good showmen, but don't know when a good deal is a good deal, to take the deal and get the deal done. On the area of welfare reform, the three things I wanted to accomplish, I never wavered, because I knew that would be transformative. And even today, there are fewer people on welfare today in the middle of a deep recession than there were in 1996 before welfare reform. Tells you how transformative this has been. We wanted three things, I never wavered. Time limits, block grant, work requirement. I was willing to compromise on everything. Did I get everything I want? No. But we got what was transformational done. You need a leader who understands what's the most important thing. Look at the debt ceiling increase. I was against the deal. I was against the whole negotiation. I commend Jim DeMint. Cut, cap, and balance is a great program. But what we really needed was balance, balance, and balance. Understand, any negotiation you go into, there's a few married people in this room, I suspect. Anybody ever go into a negotiation with someone that you have had a disagreement with and expect to walk out with 100% of what you want and that they get nothing? You don't win too many of those arguments that way. Anybody ever negotiate anything where you went in and said, unless I get 100%, you don't get my vote and there will be no deal? You can't do that. What you have to do is identify what's key for you and what's key for them. And for me, what's key for me is that we have a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution passed that requires a balanced budget and limits the federal government spending to 18% of GDP. That's a win. And if we get that passed, within 8 to 10 years, once it's ratified by the states, then we'll be required to balance the budget. Now say, well, that's too far away. No, it's not. Because you can't get there overnight. It's going to take a while to get there. And you will have won the debate. Instead, we focused on cuts today. And I love the Tea Party. But the idea that we had to have cuts today was focusing on the wrong thing. A cut today is great for today. But the next Congress can overturn that cut and put it right back. You need to focus on what's transformative, not what makes you feel good. And I focused on what was transformative, the balanced budget amendment. This campaign will be about repealing Obamacare, balancing the federal budget with a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I can tell you, unless that happens, we will never balance the federal budget, period. It will not happen. So you have someone who's won tough elections as a conservative and gotten things done in Washington, D.C. once they got there, and won re-election to the United States Senate in 2000. In a year that George Bush lost the state by 4, I won it by 5. I was the only senator conservative to win a state that George Bush lost in 2000. Now many will say, well, you lost your last election. That's true, I did. 2006 was a pretty bad year in Pennsylvania. We lost everything. We lost the governor's race by 22 points. We lost 5 congressmen. We lost the House. We had a meltdown in the state. And I got swept out by a big number. But one thing I didn't do is I never changed my principles. I stood and fought for Social Security reform in the second oldest per capita state in the country, Pennsylvania. I stood and fought for us getting more involved in Iraq at the time when there were calls for pullouts before the surge. I stood and fought for the things I believed in, whether they were popular or not. Why? Because I believed they were right for this country. If you want someone that you can depend upon, not that necessarily agrees with you on everything, but someone that you know when they say that this is what they're going to do, they have a track record of actually doing it and being successful, not always, but a pretty good percentage of the time, then I think the people of South Carolina have an opportunity to tell the national media that they're looking for a true conservative, someone who can defeat Democratic incumbents in swing states, and someone who can actually get things done. Is it no wonder the national media does not want to talk about us? I mean, if you think about it, are they for someone who can beat Barack Obama in Pennsylvania and Ohio and then actually go down and pass conservative things? Hell no. Well, you have a chance to say hell yes here in South Carolina. I'll be happy to stop and take your questions. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
My question is, what is your thoughts and ideas on what you would do with the Department of Education? It's not rather obvious when Jimmy Carter set that up. He knew what he was doing as far as dumbing down our children's generation going forward here. What are your plans to do with that?
Well, just so you don't think I'm too tough on my wife, we also homeschool. So I just wanted to let you know that. We've been homeschooling for 19 years. Now, we were homeschooling when everyone thought it was sort of, you were sort of a freak backwoodsy kind of, wore raccoon hats and things like that. And that's where we were treated, unfortunately, by the education establishment. Pennsylvania is one of the most hostile states in the country with respect to homeschooling because the teachers union is so powerful. And so I've fought the education battles on a personal level. And we wanted to homeschool our children because academics is only one part of the educational experience. See, we want our children to do well academically, but we also want them to do well morally and spiritually. We want them to have good character. And so I wanted to have a school environment that promoted all those things, because those were important to me as a parent. Now, I know every parent has different wants and aspirations for their children. But I come from the approach that the education system should be there to serve the interest of the customer of the education system. Okay? Now, who is the customer of the education system? It's the parents. Why is it the parents? Because parents are responsible for educating their children. We've been told by a government that no, it's government's responsibility to educate your children. No, it is not. It is the parents' responsibility to educate their children. And the school system should be there to help parents do their job. That means that they need to work closely with parents. Well, we have a system where the resources are in the hands of the government, not the customer. Imagine the customer going into a store, and the store has the money for which you're going to purchase the product. Guess what you're going to get sold? What the store wants to sell you, whether you want it or not. And that's the fundamental problem of the education system, is the customer doesn't have the resources, and therefore can't choose the product that they want. And there's an assumption, and it's a vile assumption, that the system knows better what your child needs than you do. That is the basic assumption of our education system, that they know what's best for your child. The bottom line is, the school district doesn't even know the names of my children, much less what they're good at and what they're not. I do. And so what we need to do is structure an education system that puts resources and power back in the hands of parents. You want to get good teachers, you're going to have good parents. Teachers can only do so much. And in most of the cases, unfortunately, parents have been socialized to think that it's not their job to participate in the education process. And so I share the frustration that teachers have. But we have to change this dynamic and get the bureaucrats and the administration out of dictating what the education system is going to look and have a dynamic system where parents and teachers design and work with each other to design a system that's best for children. And to do that, you have to get the authority out of Washington, get it back into the states, back into the communities, and back into the hands of parents, and that's what my policies do.
Senator, you were talking a lot about Obamacare. How would you go about changing that?
Question is, how would I go about changing Obamacare? One of the first act that I would push through is to repeal Obamacare, repeal it all. And the reason I'm for repealing it all is because it's antithetical to what made America the greatest country in the world. It is the British way of doing things. No offense to my British friend. But it is top down. It is we know best, and we will tell you what is best for you. We will tell you you're going to spend 9.5% of your income on health insurance. We will tell your business how much you're going to spend. We will give you 4 plans to choose from. 4, thank you. They will tell you everything. Everything will be directed. We will tell you, insurance company, how much money you can spend on running your business. And by the way, that was put in place in January. The federal government now tells Blue Cross of South Carolina how much money they have to spend on providing health care and how much money they can spend on running their business. 85% of most plans have to be spent on the premium dollars, have to be spent on medical care, which leaves Blue Cross South Carolina 15% to run their business. Imagine the federal government coming in and telling each of you business people that 85% of this facility's revenue has to be spent on food. And you can pay your servers and your marketing costs and your accountants and your lawyers out of the 15%. But that's what they've said. This is top down. And why are premiums going up? Because I suspect they can't make it on 15%, so they have to increase the pot so they have more of a bigger pot of the 15% to be able to pay their bill. I can tell you, I suspect that if you're a health insurance agent in this state, you've seen your revenues cut because you're the marketer of the health insurance products. You've seen your salaries cut by half. Probably most of them are out of business. This is all because of government top-down. It's the wrong approach. What's the right approach? The bottom-up. Well, how do we get a bottom-up healthcare system? How do you do that? It's hard. Because we have been socialized by our healthcare system in this very odd thing in America. And that is that somehow or another we shouldn't pay for healthcare. That somehow or another when we go to the doctor or have a test, someone else should pay. In fact, you have seniors, I'm sure there are many here, who have Medicare Part A, Part B, Part D, and they go out and buy supplemental policies just so they don't have to pay for doctor visits or have to pay for any costs. Imagine if we did that with other areas of necessity, food. Imagine if we had food insurance. Food's as much a necessity, I would argue more of a necessity than healthcare. What if after World War II, which is what happened, there were wage and price controls on businesses? So to provide additional benefits, since they couldn't increase wages, they started to provide additional benefits. One of them was health insurance. Well, back then, of course, there wasn't much in the way of health care in America. And so it was pretty cheap. What if they had provided food insurance instead of paying people's food bills? Do you think we have an obesity problem now? Imagine if you went into the local store and you walked in and you had paid it $500 at the beginning of the month, and you went around and there were no prices on anything. You just filled up your shopping cart with whatever you wanted. And you went to the checkout. Oh, they have a scanner and they run it through, and you'd be a bill of $435. And then, of course, they say, oh, but you only have to pay $20.43. That's what it costs. That's pretty much what your health care bill is, right? I mean, you have a $400 bill and you pay $20, $30, $50, $100, right? So imagine how much food how much overconsumption, how much waste there would be in a system where the payer is disconnected with the cost of the product. You want to know what the problem of cost and the problem of waste? The problem is you. Now, of course, no politician in their right mind, I guess I just disqualified myself, but would say to Americans, the problem is you. The problem is us. I'll include me. We have to change the healthcare system to have insurance be insurance. What do we use insurance for when it comes to automobiles and homeowners and everything else? Do we use it? What? The catastrophic event, the accident. You want to reform the healthcare system? Believe in the American consumer. That's what, by the way, Paul Ryan and I have proposed on Medicare. That was throwing grandma off a cliff. You see, according to Obama, unless the government rations care and controls and tells every senior what policy they will have, how they're going to get it, how the doctor's going to be paid, how the hospital's going to be paid, that's throwing grandma off a cliff. It's not. What's throwing grandma off a cliff is that system. Because eventually, you will see ration of care. The Independent Payment Advisory Board. If you haven't heard of it, iPad, Google it. And your nightmare of government rationed health care is a reality. Yes, sir. Still here?
Senator, in 1978, they passed the Humphrey-Hawkins Act that gave the Federal Reserve the right to not only regulate the dollar, but to regulate unemployment. Since in QE1 and QE2 has been performed, it's an excessive abuse of power. As president, would you overturn that act?
I would overturn, I believe in a single charter for the Fed. I am not a gold standard guy. I know there's some out there who believe that we should return to the gold standard. I know there are candidates for president who believe that. I do not want to tie our economy to South Africa's ability to mine gold. I mean, think about it. I mean, how rational is it? I mean, just to understand, for those of you who may be advocates of this, the gold standard was the idea that the economy would grow in measure with how much gold was discovered. Now imagine constraining the American economy based on some foreign country's ability to mine gold and create more gold supply. It makes no sense at all from my perspective. The Fed is a necessary evil, but necessary. The evil part of it is that, in my opinion, is that the Fed should be focused on one thing: sound money, period. And that means keeping inflation low and making sure we do not go into deflation. And I would argue that QE1, we were at risk of deflation. Very serious risk because of the housing bubble burst and assets values plummeted. And so QE1, quantitative easing 1, I think there was a great reason for it. I'm a lot more skeptical about QE2 and even more skeptical about QE3 because of the dual mandate. And why are they doing this? Are they doing this to help employment, or are they doing this for stabilization? I don't want to have that question in my mind. I want it to be clear the Fed should be about stable and sound money, period. Yes, sir?
I have an observation and a question. You speak of the Tea Party as the day, and in my opinion, had it not been for the Tea Party, there wouldn't be a discussion about that today. Now that's my observation.
I would agree with that.
Okay. My question to you is, if you're the man, Obama is not going to have he's not going to have successes to run on. He's
Pennsylvania politics.
So you
I-
can get that?
I ran a race against James Carver. Okay? I mean,
Was he the candidate or the advisor?
well, he was the advisor.
Yeah, you ain't running against him.
Well, yeah, you are. Yeah.
How are you gonna deal with Obama? He'll be out after.
Look, there's no question whoever the candidate against Obama is going to be up against a brutal machine. And one of the things that you can see, I'm a pretty passionate guy, and I care a lot about the future of this country. And I've been doing this for 16 years in public life, and I've been out there fighting battles, most of which most people don't want to bother to fight. And as a result of that, I've taken a lot of arrows, I've taken a lot of abuse by the media, and a lot of abuse by the left. You think the left hates George Bush? They really hate me, okay? And no, they do. I mean, that's just the reality. And so I've been, elephant is an apt, mascot for me. Because my skin, look, I don't take any of this personally. They can say, and they do, trust me, just about anything about me or anybody else around me. What I know is that I know what made this country great. I know and feel passionately about what can make this and will make this country great again. And I know the people that are out there for one reason. We threaten their power. Why is the New York Times today going after me, calling me a religious zealot? Because I happen to be a Christian. And they will do it. They will come after me. They will come after my family. They did in 2006. They will try to destroy me. And you know what? There are people who have sacrificed a lot more for this country than having bad things said about it. And I'm not worried about it at all. I do not lose any sleep about what people say about me in the press. Not a wink. I sleep perfectly. And I don't want their applause. If I got good things said about me in the New York Times and Washington Post, I'd have a meeting to discuss whether we were doing something wrong. Okay? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to say, I'm a native Pennsylvanian, and you were very popular. I have a lot of friends who still swear by it. I would like to comment and go back to education. We do have a massive problem. I was in charge of a mentor program at a very good high school, and we have more dropouts now than we've ever had. You know that nationwide. So we have a real problem starting from the bottom up, as you said. And the bottom up is very important because that's where it's from. And the whole topic lines with many of us. I can't tell you how many students were being in school like grandparents, not parents. It was a problem. Did you ever read Tom Freeman's The World is Flat? Well, in The World is Flat, he refers to the fact that in China, they're putting out money that people have come from. They're standing in line to hear Bill Gates in speech. Our kids are standing in line to hear Britney Spears. And that's a big difference. And somehow we have to overcome this, starting from the bottom up, because education is going to be the answer to just about everything.
Thank you for those comments. I wrote a book back in 2005. It was in response to a book written by Hillary Clinton. Her book was, as you know, It Takes a Village. The book I wrote was called It Takes a Family. And while that book is now over 6 years old, it doesn't read like it's 6 years old. Because I talk about fundamental things. And what I talk about is a fundamental and foundational breakdown of the family. I contrast the fight in America today, back then, as a fight between the big and the littles. And if you think about the bigs, the left controls the bigs. They control our education system, particularly higher education. They control big government. They control big business. And they control big labor. If you look at the big influences, and of course they control the news media and Hollywood. What was it one of the Greek philosophers says? You can have all of the armies in the world. You give me the storytellers and I will control the nation. And the storytellers, ladies and gentlemen, are telling your children a story very different from the values I suspect are reflected in this room. Our education system are doing the same. How can we possibly survive? Is it any surprise that our children don't know who we are? I was talking to a college professor at Washburn University in Missouri. They were saying that he's a history professor, and he teaches an introductory history class, American history class. And he gives as his test, the first day they come into his classroom, he gives them the American citizenship test and asks them to take the citizenship exam, which people have to pass in order to become a citizen. You know what the average score is on that test of incoming freshmen? 40%. 10% pass rate. This is America being shaped and formed. And what I said is that there are only two institutions that are holding out. There are only two institutions of which we can put our hope in to save America. One is the family, and the second is the church. That's what's left. And so what do you see the left going after more than any other institution in America? The church and the family. Do you think gay marriage is really about gays getting married? There's civil union statutes out there, but the left doesn't stop at civil unions. It's not about rights. It's about an attempt to destroy the foundational pillars that left to stand up against the left. It will destroy the family. Do you have any doubt about it? Look at the unwed birth rate now. Look what it will be as marriage becomes something that's just, well, anybody can do it. It doesn't really mean anything. It has no real significance in society. Anybody can be married at any time. In countries that have adopted same-sex marriages, the unwed birth rate has skyrocketed. It's already high here and will go higher. Look at what it will do to the church. We don't give bigots tax exemption, do we? Well, now if you are preaching against the rightness of same-sex marriage, you are now a bigot. Look at Catholic Charities in Boston who had to give up doing adoptions because they wouldn't do gay adoptions. Look at a church hall that wouldn't do same-sex marriages in their church hall, rented out. They lost their tax exempt status. It will happen. It is the ultimate wedge. It has always been the wedge. The sexual liberation movement of the 1960s has transformed this country and destroyed the American family and eroded the church to the point where even pastors are afraid to talk about sex or marriage. They're afraid because we can't talk about divorce and how harmful that is. We can't talk about gay marriage because we don't want to offend somebody's family. Ladies and gentlemen, America is a moral enterprise. We were given rights by God, and if we don't follow His word, then guess what will happen to us? It is not that hard to figure out that John Adams was right. Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to govern any other. And we will not be governed. We will not survive. Yes, sir.
I hear all the divisiveness over the ages. and you say right or left, right or, and I'm a Republican, right or wrong, we can say it that way. But freedom did not say a religion, it said the religion. It said what the people want to do. I want to understand how you're going to build that bridge, how you are going to change that divisiveness into togetherness and make
Together
us
on what?
agree.
What do you want to be together?
I want to be together with those people who
Share your values?
no, I
Who
want,
oppose your
I
values?
want to be a nation that agrees that freedom is what we're here for, that individual freedoms first, states are there as states'
How do you define
rights.
freedom?
Excuse me?
How do you define freedom?
Freedom is defined by a moral code that is underneath the laws of a government. Freedoms are individual first, moral-based, government second, government-based, and nation third, nation-based. I think that was Thomas Jefferson's thought around the way this country was going to be built, and the reason that they allowed for a confederation of states to have that separation to turn the differences between where and who were.
Well, let me just say that your definition of freedom, that freedom to do what you, and I'll say freedom to do what you ought to do, not what you want to do, is the correct definition of freedom as our founders understood it. But I would make the argument that both unfortunately, the libertarians as well as the left don't see freedom that way. And as a result, it's hard to come together. One of the things that I gave a talk on religious liberty in Houston, Texas, back in September. Rather long one, you can find it on my website. And I talked about the role of church and state. And what I talked about was that, and I read a lot of Madison, because he was the author of that, a lot of that in the Constitution. And he called what we have in America, this allowing people of faith and no faith to come in the public square, he called it the perfect remedy. If you think about what our Constitution is, it's basically a document describing a process by how we all get along. Really, if you think about it, is how do we all get along? Because we came from back then you would think there wasn't much diversity, but there were real differences, obviously. And so how did we get along? Well, we allowed everybody in, and we had imperfect solutions that got us through the next imperfect solution. And there was a recognition we weren't going to be perfect, but we were going to keep trying. And then everyone would have their say. People of faith, people of no faith. And that we wouldn't always get along. And there would be divisiveness, but as long as people had the right to make their claims. And so when Bill Kemmer of the New York Times says that I should shut up because I'm a theocrat, it is anti-Madisonian. It is anti-American.